Picture this. You're standing alone in the middle of Denver International Airport at 11 p.m., clutching your phone with shaking hands, watching your flight to Portland disappear from the departure board, while your own brother drives away into the night with your wallet, your ID, and apparently any shred of decency he once had. That was me 3 months ago, and what happened next would change everything I thought I knew about family, justice, and the power of airport security cameras. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and until that night in Denver, I thought I understood my family dynamics pretty well. My older brother Dylan had always been the golden child, star quarterback in high school, full scholarship to Colorado State, successful career in tech sales. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the responsible one, working as a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital Colorado while putting myself through graduate school to become a nurse practitioner. Our parents, Maria and Robert Martinez, had always made it clear who their favorite was, though they'd never admit it out loud. When Dylan bought his first house at 25, they threw him a party. When I graduated nursing school with highest honors, I got a card and a gift certificate to Olive Garden. When Dylan got engaged to his college girlfriend Stephanie, they offered to pay for the entire wedding. When I started dating my boyfriend Marcus, a fellow nurse who volunteers at homeless shelters in his spare time, they asked when I was going to find someone more ambitious. But despite all of that, Dylan and I had maintained a decent relationship over the years. We weren't particularly close, but we got along fine during family gatherings and occasional dinners. He had his life in Boulder with his tech job and his expensive hobbies, and I had mine in Denver with my patients and my studies. We existed in parallel universes that occasionally intersected during holidays and birthdays. Everything started to change about 6 months before the airport incident, though I didn't recognize the warning signs at the time. Dylan's behavior became increasingly erratic and secretive. He started showing up to family dinners late, if at all. When he did appear, he seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone and making excuses to step outside for important business calls. His usually pristine appearance became disheveled, wrinkled shirts, stubble, dark circles under his eyes that he tried to hide behind expensive sunglasses, even indoors. Mom and Dad, of course, made excuses for him. "He's under so much pressure at work," Mom would say, refilling Dylan's wine glass for the 3rd time during dinner. "Success comes with stress, mija. You wouldn't understand." Dad would nod along, talking about how proud he was of Dylan's latest promotion, his new BMW, his corner office with the mountain view. But I worked in healthcare. I recognized the signs of someone struggling with addiction, even when that someone was family. The sudden weight loss, the mood swings, the paranoia, the constant need for money despite supposedly making 6 figures. I tried to bring it up with my parents once, gently suggesting that maybe Dylan needed help, but they shut me down immediately. "Rebecca, your brother is doing better than ever," Dad had said, his voice sharp with disapproval. "Maybe instead of looking for problems where there aren't any, you should focus on your own life. When was the last time you got a promotion? When are you going to give us grandchildren? Dylan's getting married next year, you know." That was another thing. The wedding to Stephanie had been postponed twice already, with increasingly flimsy excuses. First, it was work obligations, then wanting to wait until the housing market settled. Stephanie, a sweet kindergarten teacher who'd been with Dylan since college, seemed more confused and hurt each time, but she stuck by him with a loyalty that made my heart ache. The first real crisis happened in February. Dylan called me at 2 a.m., sobbing and incoherent, begging me to come pick him up from some seedy motel on Colfax Avenue. When I arrived, I found him sitting on the curb in nothing but jeans and a torn t-shirt, no shoes, no wallet, no car keys. He was shivering uncontrollably, not just from the cold. "Beck," he whispered as I wrapped my jacket around his shoulders, "I think I messed up really bad this time." I drove him to my apartment and spent the rest of the night trying to piece together what had happened. Apparently, he'd been gambling, not just the occasional poker game with college friends, but serious gambling. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips to Blackhawk that started as weekend getaways and turned into 3-day benders. He'd lost his car in a poker game, along with his watch, his wedding ring, and about $15,000 he'd borrowed from his 401k. I can fix this, he kept repeating, pacing around my living room like a caged animal. I just need one good night, one good bet. I know the system, Beck. I've got it figured out now. I recognize that tone, that desperate certainty that addicts get when they're trying to convince themselves as much as anyone else. I'd heard it from patients' families, from friends who'd struggled with substances, from colleagues who'd burned out and turned to pills or alcohol to cope. Dylan, I said gently, sitting him down on my couch, you need help, real help. There are programs, support groups. I don't need a program, he snapped, jerking away from me. I need money, just enough to get back on my feet. Mom and Dad would never understand, but you've always been the reasonable one. Could you lend me 10 grand, just until I sort this out? $10,000, more than half my annual savings, money I'd been putting aside for graduate school and eventually a house down payment. Money I'd earned working 12-hour shifts, dealing with sick children and stressed parents, studying until 2 a.m. for exams. I can't do that, I said quietly. The transformation in his face was immediate and ugly. The desperate pleading expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Can't or won't? He asked. Both, I admitted. Even if I had that kind of money to spare, which I don't, giving it to you wouldn't help. You'd just lose it again. He stood up abruptly, pacing again. You don't get it, Beck. This isn't some moral failing. This isn't me being irresponsible. I'm good at this. I'm really good at reading people, at calculating odds. I just had some bad luck, but I've learned from it. I know what I did wrong. I watched my brother, this man I'd looked up to for most of my childhood, who taught me how to ride a bike and helped me with algebra homework, try to convince me that his gambling addiction was actually a misunderstood talent. It was heartbreaking and terrifying at the same time. That night marked the beginning of 6 months of increasingly desperate behavior. Dylan started borrowing money from friends, then from loan sharks when his friends got wise. He sold his furniture, his electronics, everything of value in his apartment. Stephanie broke up with him in April after discovering he'd taken out a credit card in her name and maxed it out on online poker sites. Through it all, our parents remained willfully blind. When Dylan moved back into their basement after losing his apartment, they told everyone he was saving money for the wedding. When his car got repossessed, they bought him a temporary Honda Civic and let him keep their old Buick. When he got fired from his tech job for missing too many days, they helped him start a consulting business that consisted mainly of him sleeping until 3 p.m. and disappearing for days at a time. I tried to intervene several more times, reaching out to Dylan directly, attempting to have serious conversations with my parents, even researching addiction counselors and treatment programs. But Dylan had gotten skilled at manipulation, and my parents were too invested in their golden child narrative to face reality. The final straw came in early October. Dylan had been clean for about 3 weeks, or so he claimed. He'd been living at home, supposedly applying for jobs, attending what he said were networking events, but which I suspected were Gamblers Anonymous meetings. He seemed more stable, more like his old self. Even Stephanie had started taking his calls again. Then our grandmother, Abuela Carmen, my father's mother who'd helped raise us after immigrating from Mexico in the 1960s, had a stroke. She was 93 and had been declining for months, but the stroke was severe. The doctors at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital told us she probably had days, maybe a week at most. Our whole extended family converged on Denver from across the country. Cousins from California, aunts and uncles from Texas and Arizona, family friends who'd known Abuela since she first arrived in Colorado. It was a sad time, but also a celebration of an incredible woman who'd worked 2 jobs her entire adult life to put all 4 of her children through college, who taught Sunday school for 40 years, who made the best tamales in 5 states and never let anyone leave her house hungry. I took emergency leave from the hospital to help coordinate everything. Meals for the family, hotel arrangements for out-of-town relatives, shifts at Abuela's bedside so she was never alone. Dylan stepped up too, or seemed to. He was attentive and helpful, driving relatives to and from the airport, picking up flowers for the hospital room, even helping Mom organize the preliminary funeral arrangements that nobody wanted to think about, but everyone knew were necessary. Abuela passed on a Thursday evening,
peacefully, surrounded by 3 generations of family. We held her hand, told her we loved her, shared stories about her incredible empanadas and her terrible driving, and her ability to know exactly what you needed to hear when life got difficult. It was heartbreaking, but also beautiful. The kind of death everyone hopes for. Surrounded by love, free from pain, after a long life well lived. The funeral was scheduled for the following Tuesday at Holy Family Catholic Church, where Abuela had attended Mass every Sunday for 53 years. Family members who lived far away extended their stays to be there, and we spent the weekend sharing memories, looking through photo albums, and preparing for what would be a celebration of Abuela's life as much as a mourning of her death. That Sunday night, 2 days before the funeral, Dylan approached me with what seemed like a reasonable request. Several of our California cousins needed rides to the airport after the service on Tuesday. Their flights were all around the same time, but they were staying at different hotels and didn't want to coordinate separate Ubers. Dylan suggested we could help by giving them a ride together. He could take the Buick, but it would be easier with 2 cars. Could you drive some of them in your Hondo? We could caravan to DIA, make sure everyone gets to their terminals on time. It seemed perfectly logical. I was already planning to attend the funeral, and I didn't have anywhere to be Tuesday evening. Helping family members get to the airport felt like a natural extension of everything we'd been doing to support each other during this difficult time. "Sure," I said. "Just let me know who needs rides and when."
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Dylan smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. "Thanks, Beck. I'll handle all the coordination. Probably need to leave around 4 p.m. to get everyone there with plenty of time for their 7 and 8 p.m. flights." Tuesday morning dawned crisp and clear, one of those perfect October days in Colorado where the aspens are golden and the mountains look close enough to touch. The funeral was beautiful, packed with people whose lives Abuela had touched, full of music and laughter and tears and stories that captured exactly who she'd been. Dylan gave one of the eulogies, speaking about how Abuela had taught him that family meant everything, that you take care of the people you love no matter what. His voice cracked with emotion, and for a moment, I thought maybe this loss would be the thing that finally helped him find his way back to the person he used to be. After the service and the burial, we gathered at my parents' house for the traditional meal. The house was packed with relatives, friends, and neighbors. My aunts had spent the morning cooking Abuela's recipes, her famous green chili, her perfect rice, her flan that somehow never turned out quite right when anyone else made it. People shared stories and photos, hugged and cried and laughed. It was exactly what Abuela would have wanted. Around 3:30 p.m., Dylan found me in the kitchen, helping my cousin Sophia wash dishes. "Beck, we should probably head out soon," he said. "I've got Uncle Miguel and Aunt Rosa with me, and you're taking cousin Carlos and his wife Elena, right?" I nodded, drying my hands on a dish towel. Carlos and Elena had driven down from Sacramento and needed to catch a 7:15 p.m. flight back home. They were staying at a hotel near the airport, so the timing worked perfectly. "Let me just say goodbye to everyone," I said. "I'll get the car warmed up. Meet you out front in 10 minutes?" I spent a few minutes making my rounds, hugging relatives I might not see for months, promising to keep in touch, exchanging phone numbers and addresses. When I stepped outside, Dylan was already backing the Buick out of the driveway. Carlos and Elena were standing by my Honda with their luggage, looking a little confused. "I thought we were all going together," Carlos asked. "Change of plans," I said, loading their bags into my trunk. "Dylan's taking Uncle Miguel and Aunt Rosa in the Buick, and we'll follow behind. Easier that way, less crowded." We caravanned out of my parents' neighborhood, Dylan leading the way in the Buick with me following in my Honda. Carlos sat in the passenger seat, telling me about his job as a high school principal in Sacramento, while Elena dozed in the back seat. It was pleasant, comfortable conversation with family members I rarely got to see. The drive to Denver International Airport takes about 45 minutes from my parents' house, depending on traffic. It was a Tuesday afternoon, so the roads were relatively clear. We made good time, chatting about Abuela's incredible life, about family, about how different things were now compared to when our grandparents first immigrated to Colorado. I followed Dylan's Buick through the familiar route, out of the suburbs, onto the highway, past the outlet malls and truck stops that marked the halfway point to DIA. Everything seemed normal, routine even.
Dylan was driving at a steady speed, signaling properly, keeping a reasonable distance from other cars. Nothing that would have made me suspicious or concerned. We were about 10 minutes from the airport when Dylan's car suddenly accelerated. At first, I thought maybe he was just changing lanes or responding to traffic conditions I couldn't see from behind. But then he kept accelerating, pulling further and further ahead of my Honda. "Is everything okay?" Carlos asked, noticing my concerned expression as I watched the Buick disappear around a curve ahead of us. "I'm sure it's fine," I said, but I pressed down on my own accelerator, trying to keep up. Maybe he saw something on the road or needs to get around traffic. But there was no traffic to get around. The highway was clear and open, and Dylan's Buick was now completely out of sight. I kept driving toward the airport, assuming we'd catch up at the terminal or that maybe he had taken a different exit for some reason. When we arrived at DIA, I drove to the departure level and looked for Dylan's car. The airport was busy with typical Tuesday evening travel, but I didn't see the familiar blue Buick anywhere. I circled the pickup and drop-off areas twice, scanning for any sign of Dylan, Uncle Miguel, or Aunt Rosa. Carlos and Elena stood beside me on the sidewalk outside the departure terminal, their confusion mirroring my growing panic. The October evening air was getting colder, and the constant flow of cars dropping off passengers created a steady stream of noise and exhaust fumes. "Maybe they went to a different terminal," Elena suggested, pulling her sweater tighter around her shoulders. "Or maybe Miguel needed to use the restroom before going inside." I pulled out my phone and called Dylan's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. Then I called Uncle Miguel's phone, knowing he rarely answered calls from numbers he didn't recognize, but it was worth a shot. No answer.
Let me try calling the hotel, Carlos said, scrolling through his phone. Maybe there was some mix-up with the timing. While Carlos made his call, I walked the length of the departure area again, looking for any sign of the blue Buick. DIA is massive, with multiple terminals and levels, but Dylan knew the airport well. We'd both flown out of here dozens of times over the years. There was no logical reason for him to go to a different area without telling us. Carlos finished his call and shook his head. Hotel says they haven't heard anything. Miguel and Rosa checked out this morning as planned. A cold knot was forming in my stomach. This wasn't like Dylan, at least not like the Dylan I thought I knew. Even during his worst periods of addiction-fueled erratic behavior, he'd never just disappeared when people were depending on him, and he certainly wouldn't abandon our elderly relatives at an airport. "Maybe we should go inside and check if they're already at their gate," I suggested, though something about the situation felt increasingly wrong. We retrieved Carlos and Elena's luggage from my car and made our way into the terminal. DIA's main hall is enormous, with its distinctive white peaked roof designed to look like the Rocky Mountains. Under normal circumstances, I'd always found it beautiful and impressive. Tonight, it just felt overwhelming and impersonal. Carlos and Elena's gate was in Concourse B, which meant we had to take the underground train system. As we rode the train, passing through the tunnel adorned with colorful murals, I kept trying Dylan's phone. Each time, it went directly to voicemail. My anxiety increased. When we reached their gate, there was no sign of Uncle Miguel or Aunt Rosa. The departure board showed Carlos and Elena's flight was on time, beginning boarding in about an hour. I approached the gate agent, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm looking for 2 passengers who should be on this flight, Miguel Martinez and Rosa Martinez. They're elderly. Probably would have checked in by now." The gate agent looked at me with practiced customer service neutrality. "I can't give out passenger information, but if they have tickets for this flight, they'll need to be here for boarding." "The thing is," I continued, trying to keep the rising panic out of my voice, "someone was supposed to drive them here, and we can't locate them. This is my uncle and aunt. They're in their 70s and don't speak much English. I'm worried something might have happened." The agent's expression softened slightly. "If you're concerned about their safety, you might want to contact airport security or local police, but I really can't tell you whether they've checked in or not." Carlos placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Rebecca, why don't you keep trying to reach Dylan? Elena and I can handle things from here. Maybe there's just some miscommunication." But I knew there wasn't.
The knot in my stomach was growing tighter, and a terrible realization was beginning to take shape. I thought about Dylan's behavior over the past few months, his increasing desperation for money, his willingness to lie to family members and manipulate situations to his advantage. I thought about the credit card fraud with Stephanie, the borrowed money he'd never repaid, the promises he'd broken again and again. "Carlos," I said slowly, "do Miguel and Rosa have cash with them? For the trip?" He nodded. Rosa mentioned they had about $800 in cash, plus their credit cards. You know how Abuela always taught everyone to travel with emergency money. $800. Not a fortune, but enough to matter to someone drowning in gambling debt, enough to place a few bets, enough to convince himself he could turn it into something bigger. "I need to make some calls," I said, handing Carlos my business card with my contact information. "Call me as soon as you land in Sacramento, okay? Let me know if you hear anything from Miguel or Rosa." They nodded, both looking worried now as the implications of the situation began to sink in. I hugged them goodbye and headed back through the terminal, my mind racing through increasingly dark possibilities. The train ride back to the main terminal felt endless. I called my parents, but their phone went to voicemail. They were probably exhausted from the funeral and the family gathering and had turned their phones off to get some rest. I tried calling several other relatives, but most were either traveling themselves or had already left Denver. By the time I reached the main terminal, it was almost 7 p.m. Carlos and Elena's flight would be boarding soon, and there was still no word from Dylan or our missing relatives. I found a quiet corner near the baggage claim and tried to think through what to do next. That's when I realized I had a much bigger problem than just finding Dylan and the relatives. I reached into my purse for my wallet to buy a cup of coffee while I figured out my next move, and my hand found nothing but empty space.
I dumped the entire contents of my purse onto a nearby bench, frantically searching through tissues, lip balm, my work badge, and various receipts. No wallet. I clearly remembered having it at my parents' house. I'd taken it out to show someone a photo of Abuela that I kept in the billfold, but I couldn't remember putting it back in my purse. I closed my eyes and tried to reconstruct the afternoon. Dylan had suggested we leave around 3:30. I'd been in the kitchen, helping with dishes. He'd told me to meet him outside in 10 minutes. In my rush to say goodbye to everyone and gather my things, I must have left my wallet on the kitchen counter. No wallet meant no driver's license, no credit cards, no cash. I had my phone, my car keys, and about $3 in loose change at the bottom of my purse. I was stranded at the TSA with no way to prove my identity, no way to pay for gas to drive home, and no way to contact airport security or police with any real credibility. I sat down heavily on the bench, staring at the scattered contents of my purse, and tried not to cry. Around me, the airport continued its normal rhythm of travelers rushing to catch flights, families reuniting, business people typing on laptops while waiting for delayed departures. Everyone else seemed to know where they were going and how to get there. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I grabbed it desperately, hoping it was Dylan with some explanation for this nightmare. Instead, it was Carlos. "Boarding now, still no sign of Miguel and Rosa. Very worried. Please keep us posted." I stared at the message, and that's when the full scope of what Dylan had done began to hit me. This wasn't just about taking our relatives' money or even abandoning them at the airport. He deliberately left me stranded too. He'd known I would discover my wallet was missing, known I'd be stuck at DIA with no resources and no way to get help. But why? What did he gain by stranding me along with Uncle Miguel and Aunt Rosa? I thought back to our conversation about the airport rides, replaying every detail. Dylan had volunteered to coordinate everything. He had specifically suggested we take 2 cars instead of all going together. He'd made sure I was following behind him instead of leading the way, and he'd timed his disappearance perfectly, far enough from home that I couldn't easily get back, but not so obvious that I'd immediately realize what was happening. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. The caller ID showed my parents' home number. "Beck?" It was my mother's voice, but she sounded strange, shaky, and upset. "Mom, thank God, I'm at the airport and—" "Rebecca, something terrible has happened," she interrupted. "We've been robbed."
The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Someone broke into the house while we were all at the funeral. They took jewelry, cash, some of Dad's tools from the garage. The police are here now. I closed my eyes, feeling the last piece of the puzzle click into place. Mom, what time did this happen? The officer says probably between 4 and 6 p.m., based on when the neighbor saw a car in our driveway. Rebecca, they took Abuela's jewelry box. All her rings, her necklaces, everything she left for us girls to share. Abuela's jewelry, not incredibly valuable in monetary terms, but priceless to our family. Antique pieces she brought from Mexico, her wedding ring from Grandpa Eduardo, a pearl necklace that had belonged to her own mother, items that had been carefully cataloged and set aside to be divided among the daughters and granddaughters in the family. Did anyone see the car? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mrs. Chen from next door said it was a blue sedan, maybe a Buick. But that doesn't make sense. Lots of people drive blue cars. It made perfect sense to me. While I was following Dylan to the airport, while our entire extended family was gathered for the post-funeral meal, Dylan had doubled back to rob our parents' house. He knew exactly when everyone would be gone, exactly where the valuable items were kept, and exactly how long he'd have before anyone came home. And he used me as his unwitting accomplice, ensuring I was far away from home when the break-in occurred. If anyone had seen him leaving the house, he could claim he'd forgotten something and had to go back for it. My presence at the airport, following his car, would provide him with an alibi for at least part of the afternoon. Mom, I said carefully, is my wallet there? I think I left it on the kitchen counter. There was a pause, and I could hear her moving around, probably looking. No, honey, I don't see it anywhere. Did you check your purse? Of course, he'd taken my wallet too, probably when he went back to get whatever he'd forgotten before we left for the airport. Another piece of his plan to make sure I couldn't easily get home or contact authorities immediately. Mom, I need to tell you something, I began, but she interrupted again. Oh, Rebecca, there's something else. Miguel called about an hour ago. He and Rosa never made it to the airport. They said Dylan dropped them off at some gas station on Highway 36 and told him he'd be right back, but then he never returned. They had to call a taxi, but they missed their flight. They're at a hotel near the airport now.
Highway 36. That was the route to Boulder, not to DIA. Dylan had driven them in completely the wrong direction, left them stranded at a gas station with their luggage and their travel money, and disappeared. Elderly relatives who'd just buried their mother who were depending on him to get them safely to their flight home. I felt sick. This wasn't just theft or even abandonment. This was cruelty on a level I'd never imagined Dylan capable of. These were people who'd changed his diapers when he was a baby, who'd sent him birthday cards and Christmas gifts for 30 years, who'd driven 18 hours to be at Abuela's funeral. Mom, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I think Dylan is the one who robbed the house. Silence. Then, Rebecca, what are you talking about? Dylan drove you to the airport. He's with you. No, Mom, he's not. He disappeared about an hour ago. He left me here with no wallet, no money, no ID. He left Miguel and Rosa at a gas station, and I think he timed everything so he could rob the house while we were all gone. More silence. I could hear my father's voice in the background asking what was wrong, and my mother trying to explain what I'd just told her. Finally, Dad got on the phone. Rebecca, you're not thinking clearly. Dylan would never... Dad, please, listen to me. I know this sounds impossible, but I need you to think about this logically. Who else knew exactly when everyone would be gone from the house? Who else knew where Abuela's jewelry was kept? Who else had access to the house and knew the normal routines? I could hear him breathing, processing. Dad was a logical man, an engineer by training. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Still disbelieving, but with a note of reluctant consideration. Even if what you're saying is true, he said slowly, how would we prove it? How would we even find him? That's when I remembered something the gate agent had said earlier. If I was concerned about safety, I should contact airport security, and airport security would have cameras. Lots of cameras. Dad, I'm going to call airport security and report what happened. They'll have footage of Dylan dropping off Miguel and Rosa, and they'll have footage of him leaving without them. That should be enough to start a police investigation. Rebecca, be careful, Mom said, having taken the phone back. If you're right about this, if Dylan really if he's capable of doing something like this, then we don't know what else he might do. She was right. Dylan, who could rob his grieving parents and abandon elderly relatives, was not someone I knew or understood. There was no predicting what he might do next. I gathered up my scattered belongings and stuffed them back into my purse. The main terminal was still busy, but I could see information desks and security checkpoints. Someone here would be able to help me contact the right authorities. As I walked toward the airport security office, my phone buzzed with another text message. This one was from an unknown number. Stop looking for me. You'll never find the jewelry, and if you try to cause problems for me, things will get much worse for everyone. Some debts can't be repaid with family sentiment. I stared at the message, reading it twice, 3 times. It was definitely from Dylan. I recognized his writing style, his tendency toward dramatic phrases when he was stressed or defensive. But the content was chilling. It wasn't just an admission of guilt, it was a threat. Things will get much worse for everyone. What did that mean? Was he threatening our parents? Our other relatives? Me? I screenshotted the message and kept walking toward the security office. Whatever Dylan was planning next, whatever deeper trouble he'd gotten himself into, I needed help from people with real authority and resources. I needed the police, and I needed them to take this seriously. The airport security office was located near the main information desk, marked with official-looking signs and staffed by uniformed officers. I approached the desk where a middle-aged man with graying temples was reviewing some paperwork. "Excuse me," I said. "I need to report a crime. My brother abandoned 2 elderly relatives here at the airport, and I believe he's stolen from my family. I think your security cameras might have footage of what happened." The officer looked up, taking in my disheveled appearance and obvious distress. "Ma'am, let's start from the beginning. What's your name and what exactly happened?" I took a deep breath and began to tell the story from the beginning, watching his expression change from routine customer service to genuine concern as the scope of Dylan's actions became clear. "We'll need to contact Denver PD for the theft investigation," he said when I finished, "but you're right that we should review our security footage. The cameras cover all the pickup and drop-off areas, plus the main entrances and exits. If your brother was here with your relatives and then left without them, we'll have it recorded." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of hope. Dylan might have planned this elaborate scheme, but he hadn't counted on airport security cameras. He hadn't counted on leaving a digital trail that would prove exactly what he'd done and when. "There's one more thing," I said, showing him the threatening text message. "I received this about 10 minutes ago." The officer read the message, his expression growing more serious. "Ma'am, this suggests your brother might be involved with some dangerous people. We need to get you somewhere safe while we sort this out, and we need to contact your parents immediately to make sure they're secure as well." As he picked up his phone to call Denver PD, I realized that what had started as a family crisis was becoming something much larger and more dangerous. Dylan wasn't just a gambling addict who'd made some bad choices. He was someone willing to threaten his own family to protect whatever scheme he'd gotten involved in. And I was about to find out just how deep this conspiracy went. Officer Thompson, the security supervisor who'd been helping me, led me through a maze of corridors behind the public areas of DIA. The employee-only sections of the airport were starkly different from the soaring architecture and artistic displays that travelers saw. Plain white walls, fluorescent lighting, and the constant hum of ventilation systems. "We're going to the main security operations center," he explained as we walked. "That's where we can access all the camera feeds and review footage from today. Detective Martinez from Denver PD is meeting us there. She was already working on your parents' burglary case." The irony of the detective's last name being Martinez wasn't lost on me, though I was too anxious to find it amusing. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from relatives who'd heard about the break-in, but I'd let them all go to voicemail.
Right now, I needed to focus on helping law enforcement understand what Dylan had done. The Security Operations Center looked like something from a movie. Wall-to-wall monitors showing camera feeds from every corner of the airport, controllers sitting at computer workstations tracking flights and security alerts, and a sense of quiet efficiency that spoke to serious professional operation. Several people looked up as we entered, but most continued their work without interruption. Rebecca? A woman in her 40s with short dark hair and a no-nonsense expression approached us. She was wearing civilian clothes but had a detective's badge clipped to her belt. "I'm Detective Sarah Martinez, Denver PD. I've been working on your parents' case since they called it in about 2 hours ago." I shook her hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. Something about her presence was immediately reassuring. She had the air of someone who'd seen enough to not be easily surprised, but who still cared about getting justice for victims. "I understand you have information that might connect your brother to the burglary, and that there are additional victims, your uncle and aunt who were supposed to be on a flight tonight?" "That's right," I said, then gave her a condensed version of everything that had happened since we left my parents' house. She took notes in a small notebook, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timing and locations. "The threatening text message is particularly concerning," she said when I finished. "Can I see your phone?" I handed it over and she photographed the message with her own device. "We'll need to analyze this, but the language suggests your brother may have gotten involved with professional criminals. Some debts can't be repaid with family sentiment. That sounds like someone who's borrowed money from loan sharks or organized crime." Officer Thompson was setting up equipment at one of the computer workstations. "Detective, we're ready to review the security footage. What time frame should we focus on?" "Let's start with 3:30 p.m. and work forward," Detective Martinez said. "Rebecca, you said you left your parents' house around that time?" I nodded, and we gathered around the monitor as Officer Thompson pulled up multiple camera feeds. The security system was incredibly sophisticated. He could access cameras from the departure level, arrival level, parking structures, and even some of the approach roads leading to the airport. "Here we go," he said, pointing to a timestamp showing 4:47 p.m. Blue Buick, license plate. He squinted at the screen, read off the numbers. "That match your brother's car?" "That's my parents' car," I confirmed. "Dylan's been driving it since his got repossessed." We watched as the Buick pulled up to the departure level curb. The camera angle was perfect. We could see Dylan get out of the driver's seat and walk around to open the trunk. Two elderly figures emerged from the back seat, and I recognized Uncle Miguel's distinctive plaid jacket and Aunt Rosa's bright purple purse. "There," I said, pointing at the screen. "That's them." But something was wrong with the scene. Instead of helping them with their luggage or escorting them into the terminal, Dylan appeared to be having an animated conversation with Miguel. Without audio, we could see that Miguel was gesturing emphatically, clearly upset about something.
"Can you enhance the audio?" Detective Martinez asked. "There's no audio on the exterior cameras," Officer Thompson replied, "but watch what happens next." Dylan opened the trunk and pulled out 2 suitcases, setting them on the sidewalk. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out what looked like an envelope, handing it to Rosa. She opened it, looked inside, and immediately started shaking her head vigorously. "He's giving them something," I said. "Maybe money? Or documents?" The conversation continued for another minute, with Miguel becoming increasingly agitated. Finally, Dylan threw up his hands in what looked like frustration, got back in the car, and drove away. Miguel and Rosa stood on the sidewalk with their luggage, looking lost and confused. "Son of a bitch just left them there," Officer Thompson muttered. "Can you follow the car?" Detective Martinez asked. "See which direction he went?" Officer Thompson switched between camera feeds, tracking the Buick as it left the departure level and headed toward the exit. But instead of taking the route back toward town, Dylan took the exit toward the parking structures. "Interesting," the detective said. "He didn't leave the airport immediately. He went to the parking area." We watched as Dylan drove through several levels of the parking structure before finally stopping on level 4. He got out of the car, but instead of walking toward the terminal, he walked to a different section of the parking garage where another car was waiting, a red SUV with someone in the driver's seat. "Freeze that frame," Detective Martinez ordered. "Can you get a clear shot of the license plate on the SUV?"
Officer Thompson manipulated the image, zooming in and adjusting the clarity. The license plate was partially obscured, but they were able to make out most of the characters. "I'll run this through our database," the detective said, photographing the screen. "But first, let's see what happened next." Dylan approached the red SUV and appeared to have a brief conversation with the driver through the window. Then he walked back to the Buick, opened the trunk, and removed what looked like a large duffel bag. He carried the bag back to the SUV, loaded it into the back, and got into the passenger seat. "Two vehicles," Officer Thompson observed. "This was definitely planned in advance. And that duffel bag probably contains your parents' stolen property," the detective added. "This is looking less like a crime of opportunity and more like an organized operation." We continued watching as the red SUV left the parking structure, with Dylan still in the passenger seat. The Buick remained parked on level 4. So he abandoned the car too, which means he never intended to come back. Or he's planning to retrieve it later, the detective corrected. Either way, we know exactly where it is now. I'm going to have my team process that vehicle immediately. There might be evidence inside that tells us more about what he stole and where he's planning to go. Officer Thompson pulled up additional camera feeds, trying to track the red SUV as it left the airport property. They were able to follow it for several miles before it disappeared into surface streets where DIA's camera network couldn't reach. "Can you go back to the footage of Miguel and Rosa?" I asked. "I want to see what Dylan gave them in that envelope." We rewound to the scene at the departure curb. Officer Thompson slowed the playback and zoomed in on the envelope exchange. Rosa opened it, looked inside, and her reaction was immediate. She looked shocked and angry, showing the contents to Miguel. "Whatever was in there, they weren't happy about it," Officer Thompson observed. My phone rang, and I saw it was Uncle Miguel's number. "That's him," I told the detective. "Should I answer?" "Yes, but put it on speaker so we can hear." "Uncle Miguel?" I answered. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "Rebecca, mija, we are at a hotel near the airport. Very confused about what happened today." "What did Dylan tell you when he dropped you off, and what was in the envelope he gave you?" There was a pause, and I could hear him talking to Rosa in Spanish. Then he came back on the line. He said there was a problem with flights, that the airport was closed because of his security issue. He gave us money for a hotel and taxis, said we should wait until tomorrow to fly home. But Rosa called the airline and they said no problems, no delays.
How much money was in the envelope? $200. But Rebecca, this is very strange. Dylan seemed scared, nervous. He kept looking around like someone was watching him. And when Rosa asked questions, he became angry, said we should just do what he told us and not ask questions. I looked at Detective Martinez, who was taking notes. She gestured for me to keep asking questions. "Uncle Miguel, did Dylan say anything about where he was going, or why couldn't he take you inside the airport?" "He said he had an important business meeting, very urgent. But then why did he offer to drive us in the first place? Something is not right, Rebecca. Rosa is very upset. We think maybe Dylan is in some kind of trouble." "You're right," I said gently. "Dylan is in trouble, and unfortunately, he's made some very bad choices that have hurt our family. The police are investigating now." I could hear Rosa's voice in the background, speaking rapidly in Spanish. Miguel translated. "Rosa wants to know if this has something to do with the men who came to your parents' house." Detective Martinez leaned forward, suddenly very interested. "What men?" she asked, loudly enough for Miguel to hear. "Who is that?" Miguel asked, sounding suspicious. "This is Detective Martinez with Denver Police. Sir, can you tell me about men who came to the house?" Another pause, more rapid Spanish conversation. Then Miguel said, "This was maybe 2 weeks ago. Rosa and I were visiting, helping your mother prepare for a family gathering. 2 men came to the door, looking for Dylan. They were not nice men, expensive clothes, but scary faces. Your father talked to them outside, told them Dylan didn't live there anymore." "Did you hear any of the conversation?" the detective asked. "A little bit. They mentioned money, said Dylan had made promises he needed to keep. Your father was very upset after they left, but he wouldn't talk about it, said it was a private family business." I felt a chill run down my spine. Dylan's gambling addiction had apparently progressed beyond online poker and casino visits. He'd gotten involved with people serious enough to show up at our parents' house, people who made threats and demands.
Uncle Miguel, are you and Rosa safe at the hotel? Do you have everything you need? Yes, we are fine, but Rebecca, we are worried about you and your parents. These men, they seemed very dangerous. Detective Martinez took the phone from me. Sir, this is very important. Can you describe these men? Height, age, any distinctive features? One was very tall, maybe 6 feet and 4 inches, with gray hair and an expensive suit. The other was shorter, but very muscular, with tattoos on his hands. They drove black car, very big and fancy. Did you notice the license plate or any other details about the car? No, I'm sorry, but I remember thinking it looked like the kind of car rich criminals drive in movies. The detective handed the phone back to me. Uncle Miguel, please stay at the hotel tonight and don't go anywhere alone. If anyone approaches you asking about Dylan or our family, call 911 immediately. We understand, mija. Please be careful. Rosa says to tell you that family is everything, but sometimes you have to protect family from itself. After we hung up, Detective Martinez was quiet for a moment, processing this new information. Finally, she said, "This changes everything. Your brother isn't just a gambling addict who stole from family. He's gotten involved with organized crime. Those men who came to the house were probably loan sharks or debt collectors." Which explains the threatening text message, Officer Thompson added. If Dylan owes money to dangerous people, stealing from his family might have been his way of trying to pay them off. But why abandon Miguel and Rosa? Why involve them at all? Detective Martinez looked at me grimly. Because he needed witnesses who could confirm he was at the airport during the time of the burglary. If anyone questioned his whereabouts, Miguel and Rosa would remember driving to DIA with him. It's a partial alibi. Except it backfired because we have him on camera at the airport during the exact time frame when the house was robbed, and we have footage of him meeting with an accomplice and transferring stolen goods. My phone buzzed with another text message. This one was from Dylan's number again. Last warning, drop the investigation or everyone pays the price. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I showed the message to Detective Martinez, whose expression grew even more serious.
Rebecca, I need to ask you some difficult questions, she said. Based on everything we've learned tonight, I believe your brother has gotten involved with very dangerous people. These aren't just loan sharks. This feels like organized crime. Are you prepared for the possibility that Dylan might not just be a victim in this situation, that he might be a willing participant in criminal activity? I stared at the security monitors, still showing the frozen image of Dylan transferring the duffel bag to the red SUV. The brother I'd grown up with, who'd taught me how to ride a bike and helped me with homework, who'd given that beautiful eulogy about family loyalty just hours earlier, had systematically betrayed every person who'd ever trusted him. Detective, I said quietly, I think Dylan stopped being my brother a long time ago. The person who did this today, who abandoned elderly relatives and stole from grieving parents, that's not someone I know. So yes, I'm prepared for whatever you find. She nodded approvingly. Good, because based on this evidence, we're not just dealing with petty theft anymore. This is conspiracy, elder abuse, organized criminal activity, and possibly much worse. And if Dylan's threatening family members, we need to move fast to ensure everyone's safety. What happens next? I asked. Next, we process the abandoned car for evidence, we track down the owner of that red SUV, and we put out a BOLO alert for your brother. We also need to get protective details for your parents and any other family members who might be at risk. As if on cue, her radio crackled with a dispatch message. Detective Martinez, we have a situation at the Martinez residence on Maple Street. Possible break-in in progress. Units responding. My blood turned to ice. Dylan's threats weren't empty. He was escalating, and now my parents were in immediate danger. Detective Martinez was already moving before the radio transmission finished. Thompson, I need a unit to escort Rebecca to her parents' house immediately. Full lights and sirens. I'm coming with you, I said, grabbing my purse. Absolutely not, the detective replied firmly.
If Dylan and his associates are at that house, you could become a hostage or worse. We don't negotiate with family members as leverage. But I was already following her toward the exit. Those are my parents. I'm not sitting in some airport security office while they're in danger because of something my brother did. She stopped and turned to face me. Rebecca, I understand your concern, but you need to think logically. You have no law enforcement training, no protective equipment, and you'd be a liability to my officers. The best way you can help your parents right now is by staying safe and letting us do our job. Officer Thompson caught up with us in the corridor. Detective, I've got Officer Williams ready to escort Miss Martinez wherever she needs to go, and I've sent the security footage to your tech team for enhancement and analysis. Good. Williams can take her to the district station where she'll be safe while we handle the situation at the house. Detective Martinez's radio crackled again, and she listened intently. Units are on scene. No signs of forced entry, but neighbors report seeing multiple vehicles in the driveway and hearing raised voices. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Detective, please, at least tell me what's happening as you find out. These are my parents. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. I'll keep you informed, but you go to the station and stay there until we have the situation under control. Officer Thompson turned out to be a young patrol officer who looked like he might have graduated from the police academy last week. He drove a marked patrol car with practiced efficiency, but I could tell he was nervous about the high-stakes situation he'd been pulled into. "Ma'am," he said as we left the airport, "Detective Martinez radioed that you should try calling your parents while we're en route. If they answer, that's a good sign. If they don't," he left the sentence hanging. I dialed my parents' number with trembling fingers. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then my father's voice, sounding strained and careful. "Hello? Dad, it's Rebecca. Are you okay? The police said—" "Don't come home, Rebecca," he interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dylan is here with some men. They're looking for something they say we have. Mom and I are fine, for now, but—" The line went dead. Officer Williams was already on his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I have confirmation of hostages at the Maple Street location. Family member just lost contact with subjects inside." The response came immediately. "Unit 47, proceed directly to the staging area. SWAT is being deployed." SWAT. The word hit me like a physical blow. This was no longer a family dispute or even a simple robbery. This had become a hostage situation with trained tactical officers and the very real possibility that someone might not survive the night.
"Officer Williams," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, "I need you to understand something. My brother has been struggling with gambling addiction for months. He's desperate, he's made increasingly dangerous choices, and he's clearly gotten involved with people who don't care about innocent lives. But underneath all of that, he's still my brother. If there's any way to resolve this without violence—" Williams glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Ma'am, I understand what you're saying, but you need to know that Detective Martinez and our SWAT team are trained to prioritize the safety of innocent people above all else. If your brother and his associates can be taken into custody peacefully, that's what will happen. But if they pose a threat to your parents or to officers—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. I closed my eyes and tried not to imagine the worst-case scenarios that were running through my head. The police station was buzzing with activity when we arrived. Officers were coordinating with dispatch. Phones were ringing constantly, and there was an energy in the air that spoke to a major operation in progress. Williams led me to a small conference room and brought me a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on a burner for about 6 hours. "Detective Martinez asked me to set up a direct line so you can monitor the situation," he said, adjusting a radio on the table. "You won't be able to transmit, but you'll hear all communications from the scene." The next hour was the longest of my life. Through the radio, I listened as SWAT teams positioned themselves around my parents' house, as negotiators tried to establish communication with whoever was inside, as the tactical commander coordinated with Detective Martinez about entry strategies and hostage safety protocols. At 9:47 p.m., the negotiator's voice came through clearly. We have established contact with the subjects inside. 3 adult males are holding 2 elderly hostages. They claim to be looking for stolen property and say they'll release the hostages once they find what they're looking for. Any identification on the subjects? Detective Martinez's voice responded. Negative visual confirmation, but one of them answered the phone and identified himself as Dylan Martinez. He says this is a family matter and law enforcement should back off. I put my head in my hands. Dylan was actually talking to police negotiators, admitting he was holding our parents hostage, claiming this was somehow justified because it was family business. The brother I'd once looked up to had become someone I didn't recognize at all. Dylan's demands, the tactical commander asked. He wants his sister, Rebecca Martinez, to come to the house. Says she has information about where certain items might be located. He's specifically asking for Rebecca Martinez to come inside alone. Every officer in the room turned to look at me. Officer Williams shook his head emphatically. Absolutely not. That's classic hostage-taker psychology. They want to increase their leverage by taking more hostages. But something about Dylan's request bothered me. He knew I'd been at the airport when the house was robbed. He knew I had no information about where stolen items might be hidden. So why was he specifically asking for me? Detective Martinez's voice came through the radio. Negative on bringing the sister to the scene. We don't negotiate by adding more hostages to the situation. Dylan's response was immediate and chilling. Then maybe these old folks aren't as important to her as I thought. You've got 30 minutes to produce Rebecca, or I'll start making this more interesting. The tactical commander's voice was sharp. What does more interesting mean? We need specific information. Let's just say that Mama and Papa Martinez have been very comfortable so far. That could change. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I have to go there. Ma'am, sit down. Officer Williams said firmly, "You're not trained for hostage situations. You could get everyone killed." "You don't understand," I said, pacing around the small room. "Dylan asked me specifically, but not for information about stolen items. He knows I don't have that information. There's something else he wants from me." I thought back through everything that had happened. The elaborate airport plan, the threatening text messages, the coordination with dangerous associates. Dylan wasn't just acting out of desperation anymore. He was following someone else's plan, someone else's orders. "Officer Williams, can you get Detective Martinez on the radio directly? I need to talk to her." He looked uncertain, but made the call. A few minutes later, Detective Martinez's voice came through. "Rebecca, are you okay? We're going to get your parents safely out." "Detective, I think I know why Dylan specifically wants me at the house. It's not about information. It's about eliminating witnesses. Think about it. I'm the one who reported the theft. I'm the one who identified him on the security footage. I'm the one who can connect him to the criminal conspiracy. If something happens to me during a hostage situation gone wrong, that's one less person who can testify against him and his associates." Silence on the radio for a moment, then, "That's actually a very sophisticated criminal strategy. You think your brother's associates are calling the shots here?" I think Dylan stopped making his own decisions a long time ago. I think he's in so deep with these people that he's willing to sacrifice his entire family to save himself. Which means coming to the house would be exactly what they want, Detective Martinez concluded. They get to eliminate a witness and make it look like a hostage situation that went tragically wrong. But even as she said it, I realized we might not have a choice. Through the radio, we could hear voices in the background at the house, someone shouting, my mother crying, furniture being moved or thrown around. "Time's running out," Dylan's voice came through the negotiator's radio. 20 minutes now, and if any of those tactical teams get any closer to the house, this conversation ends permanently. The tactical commander responded immediately. "Dylan, we need proof of life. Let us hear from your parents." "They're fine, but they won't be if Rebecca doesn't show up. We need to hear their voices. That's standard protocol." A pause, then my mother's voice, shaky but clear. "Rebecca, don't come here. Whatever your brother owes these people, it's not worth—" The transmission cut off abruptly. Proof of life confirmed, but the subject terminated communication. I was already moving toward the door when Officer Williams blocked my path. "Ma'am, you cannot leave this building. Detective's orders."
Then get Detective Martinez on the radio again because I have an idea that might save everyone. When the detective came back on the line, I took a deep breath and proposed something that I knew would sound crazy. What if we set up a fake meeting? Make it look like I'm coming to the house, but actually position snipers and tactical teams to take out the threats when they think they're getting what they want. Rebecca, that's extremely dangerous. One wrong move and detective. My parents are 70 years old. They just buried my grandmother this morning. They don't deserve to die because my brother made bad choices. And if Dylan and his associates are planning to eliminate witnesses anyway, we're running out of time to save anyone. Long pause. Then, let me talk to the tactical commander. There might be a way to make this work, but it would require perfect timing and a lot of luck. What do I need to do? First, you need to understand that if we do this, there's a very real chance you could be killed. These aren't ordinary criminals. They're people who've already shown they're willing to hurt elderly family members to get what they want. I thought about my parents, probably sitting in their own living room, surrounded by strangers who saw them as nothing more than leverage. I thought about Dylan, so far gone that he was willing to threaten the people who'd raised him. I thought about Abuela's funeral that morning and how she'd always said that family meant protecting the people you love, no matter the cost. Detective, I said, tell me what you need me to do. The next few minutes were a blur of tactical planning, equipment setup, and coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies. The plan was risky. I would approach the house, as requested, but wearing a concealed wire and bulletproof vest, with snipers positioned to take out any threats the moment my parents were clear. Rebecca, Detective Martinez said as I prepared to leave the station, I want you to understand something. Your brother has made choices that put him beyond our ability to save. When we go into that house, our priority is protecting innocent people. That means your parents, and that means you. But if Dylan poses a threat to anyone, I understand, I said quietly. Do what you have to do to protect my parents. As we drove toward my childhood home, I tried to prepare myself for the possibility that before this night was over, I might have to watch my brother die. The ride back to my parents' house felt surreal. Streets I'd driven down thousands of times during my childhood now looked foreign under the harsh glare of police floodlights. News vans had already arrived, their satellite dishes extended like metallic flowers reaching toward the night sky. Neighbors stood in clusters on their front lawns, some in bathrobes and slippers, all staring at the house where I'd grown up. Detective Martinez's voice crackled through my earpiece. Rebecca, we have eyes on 3 subjects inside. Your brother and 2 unidentified males. Your parents appear to be in the living room, seated on the couch. No visible weapons yet, but we're assuming all subjects are armed.
I touched the bulletproof vest concealed under my jacket. It felt heavy and unfamiliar, a reminder that I was walking into a situation where people might try to kill me. The wire taped to my chest felt like it was burning against my skin. Remember, came the voice of Agent Torres, the FBI negotiator who joined the operation. Your job is to get them talking and keep them distracted. The moment we have clear shots with your parents out of the line of fire, we move. Don't try to be a hero. But as I approached the front door, the same door I'd walked through for Christmas mornings and birthday parties and family dinners, I realized I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to save what was left of my family. Dylan opened the door before I could knock. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were bloodshot and darting constantly, and his hands were shaking. But what struck me most was his expression. There was no guilt, no shame, no recognition that he was holding his own parents hostage. There was only desperation and something that looked almost like relief. "Beck," he said hoarsely, "thank God you came. I knew you'd understand." "Understand what, Dylan?" I asked, stepping into the house. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Furniture was overturned, family photos were scattered across the floor, and I could see that someone had ripped open the cushions on Mom's favorite armchair. That's when I saw my parents. They were sitting on the couch, holding hands, both looking older than I'd ever seen them. Mom's eyes were red from crying, and Dad had a small cut on his forehead that was still bleeding. But they were alive, and they were alert. "Understand that this whole mess isn't my fault," Dylan continued, closing the door behind me. These guys, he gestured toward two men standing near the kitchen. They came to collect what owed, and suddenly everyone's acting like I'm the bad guy. The two men looked exactly like what central casting would order for movie criminals. The taller one, probably in his 50s, wore an expensive suit, but had the kind of facial scarring that suggested a violent past. The shorter man was built like a linebacker and had intricate tattoos covering his hands and neck. Both were watching me with the cold assessment of predators evaluating prey. "Dylan," I said carefully, "what exactly do you think you owe these people?" "It's not what I think, it's what they know. $350,000 plus interest, money I borrowed to make investments that would have paid off if I just had a little more time." $350,000. That number hit me like a physical blow. That wasn't gambling debt. That was organized crime territory. That was the kind of money that got people killed, that got families destroyed. "Investments," the taller man said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "Your brother is creative with his language, Miss Martinez. He borrowed money to place bets on games he was certain he could predict. When those predictions proved incorrect, he borrowed more money to win back what he had lost. A classic spiral." "But the jewelry," Dylan said desperately. "Abuela's jewelry, the cash from the house, that's gotta be at least 50 grand, right? It shows good faith." The shorter man laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. $50,000 is what your brother loses in a single poker hand, little sister. $50,000 is not even the interest on what he owes. Through my earpiece, I heard Detective Martinez. "Rebecca, we need them to move away from your parents. Can you draw them toward the kitchen?" But I was starting to understand the real scope of what Dylan had gotten himself into. These weren't just loan sharks collecting gambling debts. The expensive clothes, the professional demeanor, the casual way they discussed hundreds of thousands of dollars, these were people involved in much larger criminal enterprises. "So what's the plan here?" I asked, taking a step toward the kitchen. "You rob my parents, terrorize elderly relatives, and think somehow that solves a $350,000 problem?" "The plan," the tall man said, "was for your brother to repay his debts using family resources. When that proved insufficient, we needed to explore alternative arrangements." "Alternative arrangements?" Dylan's face went pale. "Beck, don't listen to them. I can fix this. I just need—" "Your brother," the tall man continued, ignoring Dylan completely, "has certain skills that could be valuable to our organization. Computer knowledge, access to healthcare systems through your connections, information about wealthy families in the area. His debt could be restructured in exchange for ongoing services." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. They weren't just here to collect money. They were here to recruit Dylan into their criminal organization, using our parents as leverage and me as additional insurance. This was never going to end with a simple payment. "You want him to become a criminal?" I asked.
"Your brother became a criminal the moment he accepted our money," the short man replied. "Now we're simply discussing the terms of his employment." "Rebecca, we have movement. 2 more subjects approaching the house from the back. This is getting complicated." More people were coming. Whatever this organization was, they'd brought backup, which meant they were planning for this to get messy. I looked at my parents, still sitting on the couch, still holding hands, and realized they understood exactly what was happening. "Mom, Dad," I said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry Dylan brought this to your door." "It's not your fault, mija," Mom said quietly. "Sometimes people we love make choices we can't understand or fix." Dad nodded. "Your brother has been lying to us for months. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't want to believe it was this bad." "Enough family therapy," the tall man said sharply. "We have business to conclude. Miss Martinez, your brother's debt becomes your family's responsibility. Either he works for us or we collect what's owed through other means." "Other means?" "Your parents' house is worth approximately $400,000. Your nursing salary, combined with their retirement savings, could service the debt over time. Or there are other options. Insurance policies, for example, often pay out substantial amounts when accidents occur."
He was threatening to kill my parents for insurance money. Dylan's gambling addiction had brought professional killers to our family home, and now they were calmly discussing murdering the people who'd raised us. "You're insane," I said, but my voice came out steadier than I felt. "We're business people," the short man corrected. "We provide services. We expect payment. Your brother understood the terms when he accepted our money." Dylan was pacing now, his movements becoming more erratic. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Beck, I never meant for Mom and Dad to get hurt. I thought I could win the money back, thought I could fix everything before anyone found out." "But you couldn't, because the system isn't designed for you to win. It's designed to keep you from losing until you lose everything." "Don't lecture me," Dylan exploded. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Everyone always expected me to be perfect, the golden child, the success story. When I started losing, I couldn't just admit failure. I had to find a way to make it work." Movement at the back door. 3 additional subjects entering. "We need to move now." But before I could process what that meant, the front door burst open and 2 more men entered. These weren't wearing expensive suits. These were wearing tactical gear and carrying assault rifles. "What the hell?" Dylan said, backing toward the wall. The tall man in the suit looked annoyed rather than surprised. "You were supposed to wait outside until we finished. Plans changed. Police activity in the area. We need to accelerate the timeline." I realized with growing horror that this wasn't a debt collection anymore. This was something much bigger, an organized criminal operation that had been planning to use my family's home as some kind of base or safe house. Dylan's debt was just the excuse to take over our property. "Rebecca," came Detective Martinez's urgent voice through my earpiece, "we're moving in 30 seconds. Get down and stay down." But there was nowhere to go. The living room was small, my parents were still on the couch, and there were now 5 armed criminals between us and any exit. "Dylan, you have to end this. These people are going to kill all of us." "No," he said, shaking his head frantically. "No, they just want their money. If I work for them, if I do what they ask—" "Look around," I shouted. "Look at what you've brought into our parents' house. These aren't business people, they're killers." The tall man smiled coldly. "Miss Martinez is more perceptive than her brother. Yes, we're going to kill you, all of you. But first, we're going to make this house look like a home invasion gone wrong. Your brother will disappear, presumed dead, and we'll have eliminated several problematic witnesses." That's when Dylan finally understood. His face went white as he realized that his criminal associates had never intended to let any of us live. He'd been manipulated from the beginning, drawn deeper and deeper into debt until they could use him to gain access to our family. "You lied to me," he whispered.
"We told you exactly what you wanted to hear," the short man replied. "Just like the gambling sites, just like the poker games. You're very easy to manipulate, Dylan." Through my earpiece, I heard the tactical commander. "All units, go, go, go." The next 10 seconds felt like hours. Windows shattered as SWAT teams entered from multiple directions. Flashbang grenades exploded, filling the room with blinding light and deafening noise. I threw myself toward my parents, trying to shield them with my body as chaos erupted around us. Gunfire, shouting, the sound of furniture splintering as tactical officers moved through the house with military precision. I kept my eyes squeezed shut and my arms around my parents, feeling their bodies trembling against mine. Then, suddenly, silence. "Clear!" someone shouted. "All subjects down." I opened my eyes to see tactical officers in full gear standing over the bodies of the 5 criminals. All 5 were on the ground, some moving slightly, others completely still. The tall man in the expensive suit was staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. "Dylan?" I called out, looking around the destroyed living room. "Here," came a weak voice from behind the overturned coffee table. Dylan crawled out, his hands raised, blood running down his face from where flying glass had cut him. "Beck, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Detective Martinez appeared beside me, helping my parents to their feet. "Are you injured? Do we need paramedics?" Dad had a few more cuts from the glass, and Mom was shaking uncontrollably. But they were alive. We were all alive.
Dylan Martinez, Detective Martinez said, producing handcuffs, you're under arrest for burglary, elder abuse, conspiracy, and about a dozen other charges. As she read him his rights, Dylan looked at me with tears streaming down his face. Beck, I never meant for this to happen. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was smart enough to beat the system. The system beat you a long time ago, I said quietly. You just couldn't admit it. The next few hours were a blur of paramedics, crime scene investigators, and FBI agents who explained that Dylan had stumbled into the middle of a major organized crime investigation. The people who'd been holding us hostage weren't just loan sharks. They were part of a trafficking operation that used gambling addicts to gain access to legitimate businesses and properties. Your brother was what we call a gateway victim, Agent Torres explained, as we sat in an ambulance while paramedics checked us for injuries. They target people with addictions, get them deeply in debt, then use them to infiltrate communities and families. Dylan thought he was just borrowing money to gamble, but they were planning to use your family's house as a hub for moving stolen goods and laundering money. How long would this have gone on? I asked. Until you were all dead, he said bluntly. These organizations don't leave witnesses. Your brother was never going to work his way out of debt. He was being groomed to help them, and when he was no longer useful, he would have disappeared. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom listening to Dylan's sentencing. He'd pleaded guilty to multiple felonies in exchange for testifying against the criminal organization. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison, followed by supervised probation. Before they led him away, he turned to look at our parents and me in the gallery. I love you, he mouthed. And despite everything, I mouthed back, I love you, too. Because that was the most complicated part of all of this. Dylan made terrible choices that nearly got us all killed. He'd stolen from grieving parents, abandoned elderly relatives, and brought killers to our family home. But underneath all of that, he was still my brother. The gambling addiction recovery counselor I had been seeing explained it this way. Addiction doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it helps us understand it. Your brother didn't set out to hurt your family. He got trapped in a cycle that escalated beyond his control, and by the time he realized how dangerous it had become, he was too deep to find his way out alone. My parents eventually moved to a smaller house in a different neighborhood. Too many memories. Too much trauma associated with the old place. Mom started seeing a therapist who specializes in crime victims, and Dad threw himself into volunteer work with a local organization that helps families affected by gambling addiction. As for me, I finished my graduate program and became a nurse practitioner specializing in addiction medicine. Every day, I work with people who remind me of Dylan, intelligent, capable individuals who got caught in systems designed to exploit their vulnerabilities. Some of them make it. They get help, rebuild their lives, repair relationships with family members they've hurt. Others don't. They disappear into the criminal underworld, or overdose, or simply give up hope entirely. Dylan writes letters from prison. Long, rambling letters full of apologies and promises to do better when he gets out. I write back because despite everything, he's still my brother. But I also know that trust, once broken so completely, may never fully heal.
The last thing I want to say is this. If someone you love is struggling with gambling addiction, don't wait for them to hit rock bottom before seeking help. Don't make excuses or enable their behavior because you're afraid of making things worse. And don't assume that because they're family, they won't hurt you. Dylan taught me that addiction can turn the people we love into strangers. But I also learned that even when someone makes unforgivable choices, love doesn't just disappear. It gets complicated, it gets painful, but it doesn't disappear. That night at Denver International Airport, when I was stranded with no money and no way home, I thought I was dealing with a family crisis. I had no idea I was actually witnessing the final chapter of my brother's descent into a world that nearly destroyed us all. But we survived. Broken, changed, scarred, but alive.
And sometimes that's enough to build on. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.